Yesterday, he defended his actions as head of the Trump Organization yesterday at the civil fraud trial in New York. NBC News senior legal correspondent Laura Jarrett has more on Trump's testimony.
A combative Donald Trump testifying for hours in a Manhattan courtroom with his real estate empire on the line.
This trial is ridiculous.
Mr. Trump showing flashes of anger as he sparred with the judge and the New York Attorney General's office, brushing off accusations that he doctored financial statements to inflate the value of some of his most well-known properties, like Mar-a-Lago, Trump Tower, and 40 Wall Street, all to defraud banks and lenders.
But at the end of the day, the only thing that matters are the facts and the numbers. And numbers, my friends, don't lie.
Already found liable for fraud, the former president now trying to fend off a $250 million penalty, growing heated when pressed about whether he overvalued assets found in the Trump Organization's annual financial statements. His face turning red, raising his voice, pointing directly at the judge seated inches away, yelling, "He called me a fraud, and he didn't know anything about me." A reference to the judge's pretrial decision that ruled in the state's favor. Also going after the Attorney General herself, watching on in the courtroom, Mr. Trump calling her a political hack.
I will not be bullied. I will not be harassed. This case will go on.
And Mr. Trump did make some concessions, admitting he probably saw some of the disputed financial statements that went to banks and lenders, while repeatedly dismissing them as not important because they included certain disclaimers, saying that his net worth is actually far greater than what's reflected in his financial statements, touting the value of the Trump brand.
The numbers are much greater than on the financial statement. And we've already proven that. They said Mar-a-Lago is worth $18 million. Mar-a-Lago is worth anywhere from probably 50 to 100 times more than that.
The judge's patience tested at times by that same rhetoric on the witness stand, calling parts of Mr. Trump's testimony irrelevant and rambling, warning the Republican frontrunner, this is not a political rally.
NBC's Laura Jarrett reporting there. Let's bring in NBC News legal analyst Catherine Christian. She's a former assistant district attorney in the Manhattan DA's office and former U.S. attorney and senior FBI official Chuck Rosenberg. Good morning to you both. Catherine, I'll start with you. So as defenses go, my accountants did it. Is that convincing? Is that compelling?
It's not a good defense because accountants rely on information from their clients to prepare tax returns, to prepare financial statements. So if the information is false, the financial statements, the tax returns are going to be false because the client gave false information. And his testimony, Trump's testimony yesterday, did nothing to help his case. He was speaking to his base, to appease his base, but it was nothing he said helped his case.
And so what about the histrionics, the theatrics that we saw in the courtroom, back and forth with the judge turning to Mr. Trump's attorneys and saying, get control of this guy or I will. Those attorneys obviously have no control over Donald Trump. So how does that play into the outcome of what we're seeing here?
Well, first, it was not a jury trial. If the jury had been in that courtroom, the judge would have shut him down because you can't have a jury hear irrelevant, inadmissible, and prejudicial evidence. The judge was wise to stop engaging with him. At the beginning, the judge was sort of engaging with him and getting upset, and then at one point just decided, you know what, let him roll. There is no jury here. Just let him go. He's the judge and he's the trier of the fact. So if Donald Trump just wants to, annoy the judge, let him do it.
And Mika, here what it looks like on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. Trump and fraud trial spars with judge and defends business. And then you actually have a view inside the courtroom. And the New York Times takes us through who all the key players are there. But you turn it over and the story talks about how Donald Trump admitted that he actually was involved in some of the conduct that is at the heart of the case.
So that's my question for Chuck Rosenberg. Chuck, Donald Trump walked out and got lots of cameras clicking and rolling as he was saying things went very well in court today. So did they go well? Did he have a good day in court yesterday?
Mika, they did not go well in court, not for Mr. Trump. But look, he's really functioning, operating in two different venues. In court, he did poorly. His answers were rambling and incoherent. To the extent he's not answering questions, the judge can rightfully infer that the answers would not be helpful to Mr. Trump. As Catherine just said, the judge is the trier of the facts. Like, if you ask me, Mika, did I steal a cookie from the cookie jar? And I tell you that you're deranged and that you're a fraud and this whole process is a sham and it's a witch hunt, I think you can logically conclude that I stole the cookie from the cookie jar. In that venue, Mr. Trump did really poorly. But there was another venue, which he cares deeply about, and it was the one outside the courtroom. And I think for his supporters and his base, the combative Trump is what they love, what they saw, and what they got. So, you know, legally, no, it was a bit of a train wreck. Politically, time will tell.
Yeah, Chuck, he was even saying at one point, you know, and I hope the public is watching, very aware of the fact that this has a TV audience around the country of people who might vote for him. So what does this presage then for future trials? And I guess, and how can judges prevent this same spectacle from becoming just an extension of Donald Trump's political campaign?
Yeah, great question, Katie. And I think Catherine alluded to the answer here. So there was no jury in this particular case. And so the judge can hear irrelevant answers and ignore them and still make a decision on the merits, which I trust this judge will do. If a jury had been in the room, if the jury had been a trier of the fact, the judge would have had to really contain Mr. Trump much more than he did. Look, I grew up as a federal prosecutor in a district where I don't believe any of the judges would have permitted this nonsense. And so a trial in front of a jury, number one, Caddy, can look very different than a trial in front of a judge. And by the way, in a criminal case, and that's what remains for Mr. Trump in 4 instances, 2 federal and 2 state. In a criminal case, I think it's highly unlikely that he even gets on the stand. So all this nonsense, all this rambling, all this incoherence, all of this histrionics, the stuff you saw in a civil case in front of a judge is not something I think you're likely to see in a criminal case in front of a jury.
Jonathan O'Meara, it is a real split screen that we've been observing over the past 6 months or so, where you have Donald Trump, who, again, hurting himself legally, hurting himself in front of judges time and time again. But in many cases, that helping him politically. The Wall Street Journal's lead editorial this morning, will Donald Trump be indicted back into office? They cite an article that was actually in Politico last week that said that Win It Back PAC actually was going to use these trials against him, use the court cases against him. And of the 4 ads, none of them moved any persuadables. And 2 of the 4 actually made those persuadables break more toward Donald Trump. So even while Donald Trump is blowing his businesses up in the court of law, the rambling that we see outside is actually connecting politically. So we may have a guy who loses his businesses, a guy who's fined $250 million and can't afford to pay it, a guy who ends up indicted and convicted in the Washington case, and a guy who's still the odds-on favorite to be the next president of the United States.